What's up, y'all? It is a beautiful morning. I wanted to share with you guys my experience with this new rear shock that I had put on this bike. In my last video, I had the old rear shock out and I had this new one beside it, and I was looking them over. Now, I did put this shock in and I adjusted the rebound and it did work. There were only like 2 or 3 settings on the rebound that felt like they worked pretty good for me. Um, anyway, I got it on and I rode it around a little bit and it felt pretty good. But the back end of the bike sat down a little bit lower than what I wanted it. I knew it was going to be lower in the back end because the new rear shock is shorter than the stock shock from eye to eye. The stock shock is 305 millimeters, and this new shock I ordered is 295 millimeters. So to raise it up a little bit in the back end, I went to tighten this nut on top of the coil to compress it a little bit and raise the back end of the bike. Well, when I started doing that, it did raise the bike a little bit, and I raised it to where, I was comfortable with it, and it, looked like I thought I would like it. So I tightened the lock nut back on it and got on the bike. Well, as soon as I got on the bike, I knew that something was wrong. I sat down and then stood back up, and the back of the bike just slammed back up. I mean, there was no more rebound. The damping was gone. So I thought, man, I've tightened the coil down too tight and I've blown a seal on the shock. So I took the shock back out, and I noticed that when I took it out, the top of the shock up here was loose, like it would twist back and forth. And it was not that way when I put it in. So what had happened is when I was tightening this nut, I guess the coil has enough pressure on the nut. When I was tightening it, it was actually turning the nut, the coil, and the threaded shaft. And it was twisting it this way, and the top of it being bolted down, it was actually loosening the top of the shock. So it loosened it far enough to where everything that was in the shock came out. It let all the pressure off. So, I mean, it was basically like being on a blown rear shock all over again. But now I will say, after filling this shock that way and then putting the stock rear shock back in, the stock rear shock does feel a lot better than what this shock does after it's lost all its pressure. That being said, I mean, the stock rear shock is still really bouncy. I'm not satisfied with it. The bike doesn't track good and it doesn't handle really good with that rear shock, but it's way better than this shock is after it's lost everything in it. So I tightened the top of this shock back down the best I could, and I put a little air in it, and I checked it, and it's holding air. So there's no bad seals or nothing. It just, like I said, it loosened the top and it let everything out. I'm not sure what I want to do with this shock. My initial thought is just to send this shock back and get a refund, because I've adjusted this nut on mini shocks and I've never had that problem, never seen that happen before. I guess, I mean, it's a cheaper shock. I didn't pay a lot for it, but I would expect that not to happen. So what I'm thinking right now is I'm probably going to return that shock, and I'm going to keep looking. I'm going to keep looking and keep my eye out for something else. But who knows? I mean, I changed my mind a lot. I could decide to try to keep this shock and see what happens. Another thing I want to do when I get the rear shock straightened out, I'm going to change the oil and go with a heavier oil weight in the forks. And I may even take the spacers out under the fork caps and make some longer ones and put in to stiffen those up. But we'll see how that goes. But anyway, that's where I'm at right now with the rear shock. If I don't change my mind, I'm going to send it back. But, you know, like I say, I changed my mind a lot. So I could decide to keep it, put it back in, play with it some more, and, you know, see if it holds up. But anyway, that's going to do it for this video, guys. Thank you for tuning in and watching. If you have not subscribed, I hope you do, and hit that like button. There will be more videos coming, and we'll see you guys next time.